So let me address a very common complaint about Sony cameras, the very complicated menu system. But in reality, it is not. It's just Sony giving us everything that we actually need, and it is up to us to customize it to how we want to use it. So in today's video, I will give you my essential Sony settings for my a7C II, but this actually works with almost all Sony cameras with a new menu system. So hi everyone, this is Jiggie, a portrait and wedding photographer from the Philippines, and welcome to the channel. So before anything else, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and would want to learn more about off-camera flash photography or maybe just lighting in general, then this channel is for you. So you might want to consider subscribing, and while you're at it, click that notification bell. Now, if you want to see some of the images that I've created, you could always find me in my social media sites on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Jiggy Alejandrino. Okay, so let's go to the most basic one first. The first thing you need to do is press your menu button, then go to sub-menu 3, which is this one, the camera icon. Then go to File Format, and normally I put it to RAW plus JPEG. Now I shoot RAW plus JPEG for these particular reasons. Number one, I shoot in RAW to maximize my camera's capabilities, basically getting everything that the sensor and lens can give me. And at the same time, I shoot in JPEG so that it's very easy for me to give out those JPEG files to family members or clients, and it's just quick and easy without me having to edit anything. So RAW plus JPEG. Then afterwards, you can actually check your RAW file type, which is lossless. I usually keep it as large. My JPEG quality is at extra fine, and of course, JPEG large. Now, the next thing that you need to do is color space. Now, contrary to popular belief, it is not supposed to be set at Adobe RGB. You should actually set it at sRGB because that will affect only your JPEG files. If you're shooting RAW plus JPEG, therefore, your RAW files are automatically set at Adobe RGB. Now, if you set it at Adobe RGB, you're actually embedding your Adobe RGB color space to your JPEG files. But most websites and social media sites will only recognize sRGB. Therefore, it will make its own conversion. So what you see might not actually be what you get. So it's best to keep this as sRGB. Now next, you go down here to the third one, File, and you rename your files. In other words, you could set your file name. In this particular case, I have it set to A7C, just so that I know which camera it came from. And here's something that's very important. Folder name, date form or standard form. Now, how often have you actually shot with an SD card inside your camera and never reformatted? And then after you're shooting, you have to open up one folder and look for all the files that you shot that day. By setting it in date form, what it basically does is that every time you're shooting, it will categorize it into folders depending on the date that you actually shot in. So this is very practical. So keep it at date form, then file number, set it as series, and you're good to go. Now you have copyright info also, which I took time to fill up. I want my right copyright info to be on, set my photographer as my name, of course, and set copyright by, of course, myself too. So display copyright info will be set okay. There we go. So everything's set. Then from there, I will go here, down here, and go to flash. So number one, my flash mode will be fill flash. Exposure compensation will be set to ambient only and not ambient plus flash. Because ambient only, this little button here, exposure compensation, will only adjust ambient light and it will not affect my flash. Because if I set it to ambient light and flash, and therefore every time I am touching it, it's also going to do exposure compensation for flash, which I don't want to do. Now my wireless flash is set to on, and my external flash set, I will show you later why that one is important. All right. So next, we go here to color tone, my dynamic range optimizer or DRO. Well, first things first, my creative look is just set to standard. My DRO or dynamic range optimization is set at level 2. So what does that do? It basically takes your highlights and brings it back, and it takes your shadows and opens it up. In other words, you are going to get a proper exposure even in those high contrast or difficult lighting situations. You could always put it to level 5, but for me, that's too HDR, so I put it at level 2. Next, I go here to the 5th one, and I turn off AF illuminator. Basically, that's that little white light here that when you're focusing, especially at night, it's going to give that light there that doesn't really look professional. So I usually turn it off, and my Sony cameras can actually focus well in low light situations anyway. Then afterwards, this is actually the most important. I go here, area, date, and time. I always set the date and time consistently with every single camera. And how do I do that? I actually base it on my phone. So you can see now, date and time with the new version of the Sony system, you can actually set even up to the second so that you have no problems in terms of syncing multiple cameras whenever you put it all in the computer. So that's basically how I set up my menu system for this A7C2. However, there's more because the Sony camera also has custom function buttons and at the same time a quick menu. As I said earlier, it is actually a very complicated menu system, but Sony gave us the option to make the menu system our own. So that's why there's a quick menu system and custom function buttons. So let's talk about my custom function buttons first. So you go here and you go Operation Customize. So when I go to Operation Customize, the first thing that I do is you can see here, there's a play button. So there's a custom key setting that will affect only when you are actually viewing your images. So I set mine at rating to C1. So the beautiful thing about that is, look, if I press play, when I press custom function 1, you see that star over there? That means it actually rates the image, and the best thing about that one is when you're shooting, oh, I like this image, I like this image. When you get to post, you will see it in your raw conversion software or your culling software. It is already marked, so it just makes life a lot easier. Next, afterwards, I go to my custom key. Now, I have my flash setting. Let's say, for example, now my custom key, which is on photo, I normally have the first one here on custom function 1, I would set that as my flash. So I would go here, flash, and I will set it to external flash firing set. Because the beautiful thing about that is that when I'm shooting with my off-camera flash, if you guys have seen it in my videos, whenever I am shooting, I can actually control my flash using the in-menu system of my camera. So if I press C1, it's just going to show the details of my flash there. So it makes it easier for me to change the settings of my flash. Then, of course, on C2, I will set here, C3, I would set as touch operation. So when I press this one, you see it turns on and off. Now, the reason why I do that is there are instances where I don't want the touch screen to be active because you might accidentally hit it and change the settings. So in very fast shooting scenarios, I normally turn off my touch screen. All right. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. This is your quick menu. So from here, you notice it's the first one, it's starred. You could add specific items to this one that will allow you to actually go through the things that you normally use the most. So number one, I normally put format. Then you notice you have 5 menus. And then on the second one, I would put auto review. So auto review allows me to set how much time that the picture that I took will be on. Meaning if I'm shooting, let's say for example in the studio, it's always best for me to have my auto review on so that it's easier for me to see how the picture turned out without having to press play. But at the same time, if I'm shooting, let's say for example, during weddings, I don't want auto review on because it just slows down how I'm shooting. So if you notice, I am putting it depending on how I actually used it. Now, here's something that for me is helpful whenever I am shooting for content for you guys. HDMI resolution, I put it here. And then I also put HDMI output settings, HDMI info display on and off, and of course, HDMI output settings. All right, so I put it there. Now, another thing that I always put also here in my quick menu would be monitor brightness. Because when I'm shooting outdoor, sometimes you need the monitor to be super bright. So that's why here I would put monitor brightness right there. So I'll put it here at the very last. So finally, the last thing I would put here is silent shutter. This is something particularly helpful, especially when I am shooting weddings, to keep the solemnity of the ceremony. And at the same time, I often shoot with videographers where they do interviews, so you don't want to be hearing the click of the shutter while they're interviewing the bride. So that's basically how I set my camera. You can see now, if you go here to my menu settings, everything is there. Very easy for me to access. Now, all of these menu systems, as I said in the intro, you could set to your personal preference. If you're a video shooter, you can customize the buttons also for video. In other words, when you switch it to video, your custom buttons will change. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, especially if you want to learn more about off-camera flash photography or maybe just lighting in general. So while you're at it, might as well click that notification bell too. Now, if you want to see some of the images that I've created, you could always find me in my social media sites on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Jiggy Alejandrino. Okay, till the next video.